My name is Vivian, and at 62 years old, I never expected to be starting over. 3 months ago, my husband Harold, of 40 years, passed away after a battle with cancer. We lived a comfortable life in Connecticut, not extravagant, but secure. Harold always had a plan for everything, especially for our future. What our son Jeffrey doesn't know is that there's a little house on the Spanish coast waiting for me. Let me know where you're watching from, hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll tell you why I'm glad I kept quiet about it. I met Harold back in 1983 at Lakeside Community College. I was 20 years old, working as a receptionist in the administration office while taking night classes. Harold was 25, attending business courses after serving in the military. He would stop by my desk every Tuesday and Thursday, always with a question that could have been answered by the bulletin board right behind him. His smile gave him away every time. Our courtship was simple and sweet. Harold didn't have much money then, but he was creative with dates. We'd pack picnics for the park, attend free concerts in the town square, and spend hours at the library talking in whispers. 6 months after we met, he proposed with his grandmother's ring, explaining that someday he'd buy me a bigger one when he could afford it. I told him I'd never want a different one. We married in a small ceremony at my parents' backyard. My dress cost $98 from a department store sale, and we served homemade food cooked by our families. Our honeymoon was a weekend at a bed and breakfast 2 hours away. Everything was modest, but it was perfect because we were building something together. The early years weren't easy. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture collected from thrift stores and family hand-me-downs. Harold started at Northeastern Insurance in their sales department, working long hours while I finished my associate's degree in office administration. We counted every penny, clipped coupons, and celebrated small victories like paying off our first car loan early. When I became pregnant with Jeffrey in our 3rd year of marriage, we were thrilled but terrified about the finances. Harold started working weekends and took on extra clients. I remember him sitting at our tiny kitchen table late at night, calculator in hand, planning how we'd afford everything a baby needed. That was Harold, always planning, always preparing. Jeffrey arrived in the spring of 1986, a healthy 8-pound boy with Harold's blue eyes and my dark hair. Harold cried when he held him for the first time, whispering promises about all the opportunities his son would have. We brought our baby home to that small apartment where his crib barely fit in the corner of our bedroom. As Jeffrey grew, so did Harold's career. By the time our son was starting kindergarten, Harold had been promoted to regional sales manager. We were able to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't the biggest home on the block, but Harold insisted on putting down 20% and choosing a 15-year mortgage instead of 30. "We'll own it outright before Jeffrey goes to college," he'd explain. I admired Harold's financial discipline but didn't fully understand all of it. When his paychecks increased, our lifestyle improved only marginally. He drove the same car for 10 years. I shopped sales for our clothes. We took one vacation each year, always carefully budgeted. When friends or colleagues bought luxury cars or second homes, Harold would smile and say, "That's nice for them, but we're playing the long game." In 1997, when Jeffrey was 11, Harold went on his first international business trip to Spain. He came back transformed. For weeks, all he talked about was the food, the architecture, the pace of life, and especially the people. He brought back a small ceramic tile with a hand-painted sun that we hung in our kitchen. "Someday," he told me, "we'll see sunsets like that together every night." 2 years later, Harold surprised me with our first family trip to Spain. We stayed in a small coastal town called Nerja, far from the tourist-packed resorts. Our rental was a simple apartment, a 5-minute walk from the beach. Jeffrey complained about missing his friends and video games, but Harold was in his element. He practiced his beginner Spanish with shopkeepers and restaurant owners who appreciated his earnest efforts and rewarded us with extra tapas and local recommendations. During that trip, Harold and I took a walk alone one evening along the Balcón de Europa, a promenade overlooking the Mediterranean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pinks and oranges that reflected off the sea. Harold squeezed my hand and said, "This is where we should spend our retirement. Not all year, maybe, but the winters for sure." I thought it was just vacation dreaming the kind everyone does before returning to reality. I didn't know then that Harold was already forming a plan. Those 2 weeks in Spain became a touchstone for us. Back home, Harold enrolled in Spanish language classes at the community center. He subscribed to Spanish cooking magazines and practiced paella and tortilla española in our kitchen on weekends. He started following Spanish news and politics. What I thought was a hobby was actually Harold laying groundwork for our future. As years passed, Harold's position at Northeastern Insurance continued to advance. By the early 2000s, he was a vice president overseeing multiple regional offices. Our financial situation was comfortable, yet our lifestyle remained moderate. We upgraded to a slightly larger home in the same town when Jeffrey was in high school, but it was still modest compared to what Harold could have afforded. "Why don't we ever splurge a little?" I asked once after his particularly large year-end bonus. Harold kissed my forehead and said, "Because security feels better than splurging. Trust me on this." And I did trust him completely. Harold was the most responsible person I'd ever known, and his steady approach to everything had created a stable, loving home for our family. What I didn't fully grasp then was that Harold wasn't just saving. He was strategically building our future piece by careful piece, including a dream that began on that Spanish promenade. Jeffrey was our pride and joy when he was young, curious, energetic, and affectionate. He'd run to the door when Harold came home from work, jumping into his father's arms for a bear hug. We'd have family game nights on Fridays, build elaborate blanket forts on rainy weekends, and take Sunday drives to explore nearby towns and parks. Harold coached Jeffrey's Little League team for 3 seasons, despite his busy work schedule never missing a game. School came easily to our son. He brought home excellent grades without much effort, which made us proud but sometimes concerned about his work ethic. "Natural talent only gets you so far," Harold would tell him. "It's discipline that carries you the rest of the way." Jeffrey would nod, but the lesson didn't quite sink in during those early years when everything came easily. The first signs of change appeared during Jeffrey's teenage years. He started comparing our lifestyle to his friends' families who had vacation homes, boats, and the latest electronic gadgets. "Dad Tyler's family is going to Vail again for Christmas. They have a condo there. Why don't we ever go skiing?" Or, "Why do I have to drive this old Honda when Jason got a BMW for his 16th birthday?" Harold would patiently explain that different families made different choices and that we were focusing on long-term security rather than short-term luxuries. "We're putting money away for your college education instead," he'd say. Jeffrey would roll his eyes, a gesture that always made Harold's jaw tighten. When college application time came, Jeffrey had his heart set on Westridge University, a prestigious private school with a price tag to match. Harold and I had saved enough for state college tuition, but Westridge would stretch us considerably. "I can't show up at state with all my friends going to top schools," Jeffrey argued. "It will ruin my career before it even starts." After much discussion, Harold agreed to pay for Westridge, but with conditions. "You maintain a 3.5 GPA, you work part-time during the school year, and full-time in summers, and you graduate in 4 years, he stipulated. Jeffrey agreed enthusiastically, though I noticed he didn't write anything down when Harold listed the requirements. Westridge changed our son in ways we hadn't anticipated. He joined a fraternity filled with wealthy students and began adopting their tastes and expectations. His calls home became less frequent, and when he did call, it was often to request extra money for expenses we hadn't budgeted for. Fraternity dues, spring break trips, or wardrobe updates for networking purposes. Harold usually said no, which led to arguments. "You don't understand how things work in the real world, Dad," Jeffrey would say. "These connections I'm making now will pay off later. It's an investment." The irony of our son lecturing his father about investments wasn't lost on Harold, but he kept his composure, simply reminding Jeffrey of their agreement. During his junior year at Westridge, Jeffrey met Sophia Carrington, a business major from a wealthy New York family. When he brought her home for Thanksgiving, the differences in our worlds became starkly apparent. Sophia was polite, but clearly uncomfortable in our home, asking if we had a housekeeper or personal chef, then looking surprised when I laughed and said I'd cooked everything myself. Sophia's family has a summer house in the Hamptons and a winter place in Palm Beach, Jeffrey told us proudly, as if these properties were his own accomplishments. Harold nodded politely while giving me a meaningful look across the table. That night he whispered, "I'm worried about who our son is becoming." After graduating from Westridge with a business degree and a 3.2 GPA below the agreed requirement, Jeffrey took a job at a financial firm in Boston where one of Sophia's family friends was a partner. 6 months later, they were engaged. The wedding was largely planned and paid for by Sophia's parents, an elaborate affair at a country club that made our backyard wedding seem like a children's birthday party by comparison. Harold and I felt out of place among the Carrington family's social circle. During the rehearsal dinner, Sophia's father gave a toast mentioning how Jeffrey would be joining the family business ventures soon, something our son had never mentioned to us. When I asked him about it later, he vaguely referred to opportunities and changed the subject. Within 2 years of marriage, Jeffrey and Sophia had 2 children, Emma and Lucas, our beautiful grandchildren, who we adored but saw infrequently. They lived in an expensive suburb of Boston in a house that Jeffrey could only afford with significant help from Sophia's family. Each time we visited, there seemed to be new luxury cars in the driveway and expensive renovations underway. Our visits became increasingly uncomfortable. Jeffrey and Sophia would make comments about our clothes, our car, or our quaint lifestyle, as if we were characters in a small-town sitcom they found amusing. Harold bore it stoically, but I could see the hurt in his eyes when Jeffrey dismissed his career advice or mocked his frugal habits. "Dad, you need to enjoy life a little," Jeffrey would say. "What's the point of working so hard if you live like you're still on a budget?" Harold would simply respond, "We enjoy our life very much," and change the subject. The most troubling pattern emerged when Jeffrey began calling with financial emergencies. The private preschool requiring a non-refundable deposit, the unexpected property tax assessment, the investment opportunity that couldn't wait. Despite our concerns about their spending habits, Harold would usually help, saying privately to me, "He's still learning, and I don't want the grandchildren to suffer." After one particularly large request to cover a down payment on a vacation property that the kids need for summer development, Harold finally declined. The conversation ended with Jeffrey angrily saying, "Fine, I guess I'll just wait for my inheritance then," before hanging up. Harold sat silently in his office for hours afterward. The distance between us grew. Holiday gatherings became brief and perfunctory. Phone calls dwindled to obligatory check-ins. When Emma and Lucas sent thank you notes for birthday gifts, they were clearly written in Sophia's handwriting, with the children's signatures added at the bottom. Our son, who once couldn't wait to tell us about his day, now lived a life largely separate from ours. What hurt the most was realizing that Jeffrey seemed embarrassed by us, by our modest home, our practical car, our simple lifestyle. The values Harold had tried to instill, responsibility, gratitude, living within your means, had been replaced by an appetite for status and appearance. The sweet boy who once built blanket forts with us had transformed into a man who measured worth by price tags and postal codes. Harold never spoke ill of our son, but I could see the disappointment weighing on him. "Everyone has their own path," he would say when I expressed my concerns. "Jeffrey needs to make his own mistakes." What I didn't understand then was that Harold wasn't just philosophizing. He was making contingency plans. 2 years ago, Harold came home from his annual physical with news that would change everything. "The doctor found something," he said quietly as we sat at our kitchen table. They need to do more tests, but he's pretty certain it's cancer. The following weeks were a blur of appointment scans and consultations. The diagnosis was confirmed stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The oncologist presented treatment options but was forthright about the prognosis. Harold might have 2 years, possibly 3, with aggressive treatment. My world collapsed around that kitchen table, but Harold remained calm. "We need to get things in order," he said, reaching for my hand. "I don't want you to worry about anything when the time comes." While I was still processing the diagnosis, Harold was already making plans. He scheduled an appointment with Andrew Levinson, an estate attorney he'd known for years through business connections. "I need you to come with me," Harold told me. "You need to understand everything we're setting up." At that first meeting, Andrew explained terms I'd never given much thought to: probate, executor trusts, estate taxes. Harold listened intently, asking detailed questions. I mostly sat in shocked silence, unable to believe we were having this conversation. At one point, Harold noticed my distress and paused the meeting. "This isn't giving up," he assured me. "This is taking care of you." Over the next few weeks between his first rounds of chemotherapy, Harold systematically organized every aspect of our finances. He created a binder with all our account information, insurance policies, property records, and investment details. He added contact information for everyone I might need to reach: our banker, financial advisor, insurance agent, and various service providers. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of treatment, Harold asked me to sit with him in our living room. "There's something important I need to show you," he said, opening his laptop. On the screen was a photo of a small white house with blue shutters, bougainvillea climbing one wall with the Mediterranean visible in the background. "What is this?" I asked. "Our house in Spain," he replied with a small smile. "I bought it 15 years ago." I stared at him in disbelief. "You bought a house without telling me." Harold took my hand. "I wanted to surprise you when the time was right. Remember our first trip to Nerja when I talked about retiring there? I never forgot that dream. When property values dropped in 2008, I found this place for a remarkably good price. It needed work, but the location was perfect." He showed me more photos: the interior with its tile floors and whitewashed walls, the small kitchen with hand-painted tiles, the bedroom with doors opening to a terrace, and the view of the Mediterranean from that terrace. With each image, I felt a mixture of shock, confusion, and eventually understanding. "I've been sending money each year for maintenance and updates," Harold explained. "A local property manager named Miguel oversees everything. He sends me photos and reports every quarter. The house is fully furnished and ready whenever we want to use it." "But why keep it secret all these years?" I asked. Harold's expression grew serious. "I wasn't keeping it from you specifically. I was keeping it protected. From complications. From being factored into other decisions." We both knew he meant Jeffrey's increasing financial demands. That night, Harold revealed more details about his careful planning. Besides the house in Spain, he had established a separate retirement fund that would provide me with a comfortable monthly income. "It's structured as an annuity," he explained. "The principal can't be touched, but it will generate steady income for you for the rest of your life." He had also set up education trusts for Emma and Lucas that could only be used for college expenses with me as the trustee. "Jeffrey and Sophia can't access these funds or change the terms," he clarified. "The money goes directly to the educational institutions." Most significantly, Harold had arranged his estate so that I would have complete control over all assets. "You'll be the sole beneficiary and executor," he told me. "This gives you the flexibility to make decisions based on how situations develop." When I asked what he meant by that, Harold was uncharacteristically direct about our son. "Jeffrey has developed concerning habits with money. I love him, but I don't trust his financial judgment. If he knew about everything at once, he might pressure you for access to funds or assets before you're ready to share them." Harold took my face in his hands, his eyes earnest. "Promise me something, Vivian. When I'm gone, don't tell Jeffrey about everything immediately. Take your time. See how he responds to my passing. See who he becomes in this situation before you make any decisions about sharing additional assets. I promised, though at the time I thought Harold was being overly cautious. Our son had his flaws, but surely grief would bring out his better nature. Harold seemed less convinced, but didn't press the point further. In the months that followed, as Harold's condition deteriorated, he continued refining his plans. He recorded video messages for me to watch later, updated his will multiple times as new thoughts occurred to him, and had several private meetings with Andrew that he said were just tying up loose ends. Harold also insisted on introducing me to Miguel, the property manager in Spain, via video call. Miguel was warm and compassionate, clearly aware of Harold's condition. He promised to continue caring for La Casa Bonita and to help me whenever I decided to visit. Harold seemed relieved after this conversation, as if checking off an important item on his list. When Harold entered hospice care in our home, he requested one final meeting with Andrew, insisting that I step out for part of their conversation. Later, when I asked what they had discussed, Harold simply said, "Just some contingency plans, nothing to worry about." 2 days before he passed, during a rare moment of clarity amid the medication haze, Harold held my hand and whispered, "The house in Spain will be your sanctuary when you need it. Don't tell Jeffrey until you're there yourself. Promise me." I promised again, still not fully understanding his concern, but willing to honor his wishes. The next day, Harold slipped into unconsciousness. He passed peacefully the following morning with me by his side, 40 years after we'd vowed to love each other until death parted us. As I sat beside his body waiting for the hospice nurse to arrive, I found myself contemplating the house with blue shutters on a Spanish coast. A house I'd never seen in person, but that Harold had prepared for me with the same thoughtful care he'd shown throughout our marriage. I didn't know then how crucial that house would become, or how prophetic Harold's concerns about Jeffrey would prove to be. Harold's funeral was held at our local church, where we'd attended services for over 30 years. The sanctuary filled with colleagues from Northeastern insurance neighbors and friends we'd made throughout our life together. I was touched by how many people came to honor my husband, sharing stories about his integrity, mentorship, and quiet generosity. Jeffrey and Sophia arrived 15 minutes late, their designer morning clothes immaculate. Jeffrey gave a brief eulogy that sounded oddly generic, as if he were speaking about a distant relative rather than his father. He mentioned Harold's business success and providing for the family, but said nothing about games of catch in the backyard, Sunday pancake traditions, or the countless hours Harold had spent helping with homework and school projects. Throughout the service, I noticed Jeffrey checking his phone. During the reception afterward, he and Sophia stayed for less than an hour, explaining they had to get back to Boston for an important commitment. They left without helping to clean up or thanking the church ladies who had prepared the food. After everyone had gone, I returned to our empty house. Harold's absence was palpable. His reading glasses on the side table, his slippers by his chair, his coffee mug in the dish drainer. That first night alone, I slept with his sweater breathing in his fading scent, and wondering how I would navigate this new solitary life. The initial weeks passed in a fog of grief and administrative tasks. There were death certificates to obtain, accounts to transfer, and endless phone calls to make. Andrew, true to his promise to Harold, guided me through each step with patience and clarity. When we met to go over Harold's will and estate details, Andrew reiterated what Harold had told me. Everything had been arranged to give me maximum control and security. Harold was very specific about his wishes, Andrew explained. The house and all accounts transfer directly to you. The grandchildren's education trusts are established and funded, and there's a letter he wanted me to give you. He handed me an envelope with my name in Harold's familiar handwriting. I waited until I was home alone to read it. Inside, Harold had written a love letter that brought me to tears, expressing what our life together had meant to him. At the end, he added, "Remember your promise. Take your time revealing assets. Watch and listen carefully to how Jeffrey responds. Trust your instincts. You will know when and what to share. 3 weeks after the funeral, Jeffrey called. It was the first time I'd heard from him since the service. "Mom, how are you holding up?" he asked, his voice carrying the forced cheerfulness he used when leading up to something he wanted. "I'm managing," I replied, "taking each day as it comes." "Good, good," he said quickly. "Listen, Sophia and I have been talking, and we think you should come stay with us for a while. It's not good for you to be alone in that big house." I was momentarily touched by the offer. "That's thoughtful, but I'm okay here. This is my home." "Well, about that," Jeffrey continued, his tone shifting. "We need to be practical about the future. That house is way too big for just you, and the maintenance will be expensive. Have you thought about downsizing?" The conversation had taken only seconds to turn to money matters. "I'm not making any big decisions right now," I said carefully. "Dad would want you to be sensible," Jeffrey pressed. "Real estate in your area is hot right now. You could get top dollar and move somewhere more manageable." Before I could respond, he added, "Actually, I've already spoken to a realtor friend who specializes in your neighborhood. She's willing to give us a family discount on the commission. I could bring her by this weekend for an initial assessment." I felt a chill at how quickly he'd moved from condolences to real estate transactions. "That won't be necessary," I said firmly. "As I said, I'm not making any big decisions right now." Jeffrey sighed with exaggerated patience. "Mom, I'm just trying to help. Dad always handled the finances, and now you're on your own. These matters can be complicated." "I appreciate your concern," I replied, "but your father made sure I would be well taken care of. Andrew has been very helpful with the legal aspects." At the mention of Andrew's name, Jeffrey's tone sharpened. "You've been meeting with Dad's lawyer without me. I should be involved in those discussions, Mom. As the only heir, I have a right to know what's happening with the estate." His phrasing, "the only heir," struck me as oddly entitled. "Andrew is executing your father's wishes," I said. "Everything is being handled properly." "What exactly did Dad leave?" Jeffrey asked bluntly. "The life insurance should be substantial given his position at the company, and there must be investment accounts, retirement funds. We should go through all of that together." I remembered Harold's warnings and chose my words carefully. "The house transfers to me, of course. There's a life insurance policy that covers outstanding expenses and provides some cushion. Your father also left education trusts for Emma and Lucas." "That's it." Jeffrey sounded genuinely surprised. "What about his retirement accounts, investment portfolios? Dad made good money for decades." "We lived well, but modestly," I reminded him. "Your college education was expensive, and we helped you with the down payment on your first house, if you recall." "But still," he persisted, "there must be more." I changed the subject, asking about the grandchildren, but the remainder of the call felt strained. After we hung up, I sat contemplating the conversation. Harold's concerns about Jeffrey's reaction were proving accurate more quickly than I had anticipated. In the days that followed, Jeffrey called repeatedly, each conversation eventually circling back to finances or the house. During one call, he mentioned that he and Sophia were considering private school for Emma and wanted to know if Dad left anything specifically for the grandkids' education. When I explained about the education trusts that would be available when they reached college age, he seemed disappointed by the restrictions. Then, despite my explicit refusal, Jeffrey showed up one Saturday morning with Alicia, his realtor friend. "We were in the area and thought we'd stop by," he said breezily as they walked in uninvited. Alicia immediately began assessing the house, commenting on updating potential and staging needs while taking photos with her phone. "Jeffrey, I told you I'm not selling," I said firmly when I could get him alone in the kitchen. "Mom, be reasonable," he replied, lowering his voice. "This place is a financial burden you don't need, Sophia and I have that finished guest suite that's just sitting empty. You could live there, spend time with your grandchildren, and invest the proceeds from this house for your future." "My future is taken care of," I insisted. He looked at me skeptically. "How would you know Dad always handled the money? No offense, Mom, but you've never even balanced a checkbook." His condescension stung partly because there was some truth to it. Harold had managed our finances, though he'd always kept me informed. What Jeffrey didn't know was how thoroughly Harold had educated me during his illness, ensuring I understood every aspect of our financial situation. After Jeffrey and Alicia left, I discovered that they had gone through Harold's home office. Drawers were slightly ajar, and folders had been moved. I felt violated, realizing my son had been searching for financial documents without my permission. The following week, Jeffrey called with news that he and Sophia would be visiting again. "We need to go through Dad's things," he said. "Start deciding what to keep and what to donate." When they arrived, Jeffrey headed straight for Harold's office while Sophia engaged me in the living room, asking pointed questions about family heirlooms and whether I had cataloged the valuable items yet. Their coordinated approach felt calculated, as if they were implementing a strategy they'd discussed beforehand. Later, as we sat having coffee, Sophia mentioned that their guest suite had ample storage for keepsakes and that they'd be happy to store any valuables for me. When I said I preferred keeping things in my home, Jeffrey exchanged a glance with his wife before changing tactics. "Mom, Sophia and I are concerned about your well-being here alone," he said. "What if you fell or had a medical emergency? No one would know." "I have friends who check on me," I countered. "And I have a medical alert system Harold arranged before he passed." "Still, wouldn't it be better to be with family?" Sophia added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The grandchildren miss you." "They've seen me 3 times in the last year," I pointed out. "They hardly know me." "That could change if you lived with us," Jeffrey said. "Think about it. You'd have company support and no home maintenance worries." What they were offering might have seemed generous to an outsider, but I recognized the underlying message they wanted control of my assets and were using concern for my welfare as leverage. Harold's voice echoed in my mind. "Watch and listen carefully." That evening, after they had gone to dinner without inviting me, I overheard Jeffrey on a phone call in the driveway. He thought I couldn't hear through the partially open window, but his words carried clearly in the quiet night air. "It's not as much as we expected," he was saying. "The house is the main asset. No, she's being stubborn about selling. There must be more somewhere Dad made good money. Yeah, we're working on it. The guest suite angle might be our best bet. Once she's installed there, we can handle everything." I closed the window silently, my heart heavy with the confirmation of Harold's fears and my own growing suspicions. My son wasn't concerned about my welfare. He was focused on my assets. The guest suite wasn't being offered as a loving home, but as a controlled environment where they could handle everything. That night, I contacted Andrew and arranged to meet him privately the next day. It was time to understand my options and prepare for what was clearly becoming a battle I never wanted to fight, especially with my own son. The day after I overheard Jeffrey's revealing phone conversation, I met Andrew at his office, rather than having him come to my home. "I don't want Jeffrey to know about this meeting," I explained when I arrived. Andrew nodded understandingly. "Harold anticipated this might happen," he said, which surprised me. He asked me to prepare certain documents and options in case Jeffrey became persistent about financial matters. As we sat in his comfortable office, Andrew outlined my legal position. "Everything is in your name, Vivian. The house, the accounts, everything. Jeffrey has no legal claim to any assets at this point, nor does he have any authority to make decisions on your behalf." "What about the house?" I asked. "Jeffrey keeps pushing me to sell it." "He has absolutely no right to sell your house or even list it without your explicit consent," Andrew assured me. "Any attempt to do so would be fraud." Andrew then showed me additional documents Harold had prepared during those private meetings I wasn't part of. There was a power of attorney that named Andrew as my representative in case I became incapacitated, not Jeffrey as would be traditional. There was also a detailed letter outlining Harold's concerns about Jeffrey's financial behavior and his wishes for the estate. Harold loved Jeffrey, Andrew said gently, but he didn't trust his judgment, especially where money was concerned. He wanted to protect you from potential pressure or manipulation. As I processed this information, Andrew added, "There's something else you should know. Harold asked me to set up a secure line of communication with Miguel in Spain. If you need to go there quickly, all the arrangements are in place. You just need to call my office, and we'll handle everything." I left Andrew's office feeling both saddened and strengthened. Harold had seen this coming and had quietly built safeguards into his plans. His posthumous protection wrapped around me like an embrace, giving me courage for what might come next. When I returned home, I found Jeffrey going through file cabinets in Harold's office. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. He startled, then composed himself. "Just looking for Dad's insurance policies. We need to make sure everything's been properly filed." "Andrew has copies of all the policies," I said. "And I would appreciate you asking before going through private files." Jeffrey straightened, his expression hardening. "I'm trying to help Mom. Someone needs to take charge of these matters, and since Dad's gone, that responsibility falls to me." "Actually, it doesn't," I replied calmly. "Your father appointed me as executor of his estate. All decisions are mine to make." "But you don't have experience with financial matters," Jeffrey argued. "Dad wouldn't expect you to handle everything alone." "Your father had complete confidence in me," I said. "And in Andrew." Jeffrey's face flushed. "That lawyer is probably overcharging you. Family should handle family matters." "Andrew was your father's trusted advisor and friend for 20 years, I reminded him. "Harold chose him for a reason." The tension between us was palpable. Jeffrey finally broke the silence. "Look, I'm just looking out for your interests. With Dad gone, you're vulnerable. There are people who take advantage of elderly widows." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm 62, hardly elderly, and I'm not without resources or judgment." For the next few days, Jeffrey and Sophia continued their campaign. They brought real estate listings showing smaller condos and retirement communities. They mentioned friends' parents who had been scammed by contractors or financial advisors. They left brochures about their town in Boston, highlighting senior activities and medical facilities. I remained polite but firm in my refusal to consider selling or moving. Each night after they returned to their hotel, I would call my oldest friend Diana to vent my frustrations. "I can't believe this is happening," I told her. "It's like they're circling, waiting to divide up the spoils." "Harold always said Jeffrey had expensive tastes and limited means to support them," Diana reminded me. "Maybe they're in financial trouble and see your house as a solution." Her comment made me wonder if there was more behind their persistence than simple greed. The next morning, when Jeffrey and Sophia were out running errands, which I suspected meant meeting with realtors or financial planners, I did something I never thought I would do. I looked through Jeffrey's briefcase that he had left in the guest room. Inside, I found bank statements showing significant overdraft fees, credit card bills with alarming balances, and a notice of pending foreclosure on a vacation property I hadn't even known they owned. There was also a handwritten list titled Mom's Assets, with estimated values and notes about liquidity potential. My house was at the top of the list with a question mark next to a dollar figure that greatly overestimated its value. I carefully returned everything as I had found it, my heart heavy. Jeffrey and Sophia weren't just being opportunistic. They were desperate. Their lifestyle had caught up with them, and they saw my widowhood as a financial opportunity rather than a time to provide support. That evening, Sophia suggested we all go out to dinner at an expensive restaurant to cheer everyone up. During the meal, which they insisted on paying for using a credit card, I now knew was nearly maxed out. They ordered costly wine, and spoke with forced cheerfulness about how we were moving forward as a family. As dessert was served, Jeffrey raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, we've been talking, and we think we should set a timeline for transitioning you to Boston. Maybe aim for the end of the month. That gives you a few weeks to sort through things here." I set down my fork. "Jeffrey, I've told you repeatedly that I'm not selling my home or moving to Boston." "Mom," he sighed, "you're being unreasonable. The decision's already been—" "Already been what?" I interrupted. Jeffrey and Sophia exchanged glances. "We've already started making arrangements," Sophia said smoothly. "The guest suite is being prepared, and we've researched senior activities in our community." "Without consulting me," I noted. "Because you're being stubborn," Jeffrey said, his facade of patience cracking. "Dad would want you to be practical about this. The house is too big, too expensive to maintain, and frankly, you shouldn't be living alone at your age." "My age?" I repeated. "I'm 62 in excellent health and perfectly capable of making my own decisions." "We're your family," Sophia interjected. "We know what's best for you." The presumption in her statement was breathtaking. I looked at these two people across the table. My son, who had once been a sweet boy with Harold's eyes, and his wife, who had never shown any interest in me until my house became a potential asset, and felt a profound sadness. "I think it's time to go home," I said quietly, signaling for the check. The drive back was tense. Once home, I excused myself and went to bed early, locking my bedroom door, something I had never done before. I lay awake for hours contemplating what to do. Harold had prepared me for this possibility, but facing the reality of my own son's betrayal was still devastating. The next morning, Jeffrey and Sophia announced they were returning to Boston, but would be back the following weekend to continue making preparations. After they left, I called Andrew and told him everything that had happened, including what I'd found in Jeffrey's briefcase. "Harold suspected financial problems," Andrew said. "It's why he structured things the way he did." He paused, then added carefully, "Vivian, I think you should consider activating our contingency plan sooner rather than later." "You mean going to Spain?" I asked. "Yes, based on what you're describing, Jeffrey may take more aggressive steps. Harold wanted you to have a safe haven if things deteriorated." I wasn't ready to make that decision yet, but I thanked Andrew and promised to stay alert. Little did I know how quickly events would escalate. 3 days later, I returned from grocery shopping to find a moving truck in my driveway and men carrying empty boxes into my house. A woman with a clipboard was directing them toward different rooms. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her. "What's going on here?" "Mrs. Harrison," she confirmed. "We're the relocation specialists your son arranged. We're here to begin packing your essentials for the move to Boston." I was speechless. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text message from Jeffrey. "Start packing. The house has been sold. Movers will help with everything. You'll thank me later." I stared at the message in disbelief, then looked back at the woman. "There must be a mistake," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I haven't sold my house, and I'm not moving to Boston." The woman frowned, checking her paperwork. "That's not what we were told. Mr. Jeffrey Harrison arranged everything. We have signed contracts." "May I see those contracts?" I asked. She hesitated, then handed me a folder. Inside was a sales agreement for my house with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. The document showed the house selling for 20% below market value to a company called Carrington Holdings, which I suspected was connected to Sophia's family. My hands shook as I examined the blatant forgery of my signature. "This is not my signature," I said firmly, "and I have not agreed to sell my home. Please leave immediately or I will call the police." The woman looked uncertain. "I need to call Mr. Harrison about this." "Please do," I said, "and while you're doing that, I'll be calling my attorney." I stepped away and immediately called Andrew, explaining the situation in a hushed, urgent voice. "They're claiming to have a signed sales agreement," I told him. "Jeffrey has forged my signature." "That's a criminal offense," Andrew said gravely. "I'm calling the police right now, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let anyone remove anything from the house." While waiting for Andrew and the police, I stood in my driveway blocking the moving truck. The relocation specialist was on the phone with Jeffrey, and I could hear his raised voice through the speaker. The moving men stood awkwardly by their truck, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. When the police arrived, I explained what had happened and showed them the document with the forged signature. They took statements and advised the moving company to leave the premises. By the time Andrew arrived, the movers were gone, and I was sitting in my living room trying to process my son's betrayal. "We need to take immediate action," Andrew said. "This isn't just unethical, it's illegal. Jeffrey has committed forgery and attempted fraud." That evening, I received multiple calls and texts from Jeffrey alternating between anger justification and attempts to make me feel guilty. "You're making a scene for nothing," one message read. "This is for your own good. Stop being difficult." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat in Harold's office looking at his photograph on the desk. "You were right," I whispered to his image. "You saw this coming." Then I opened my laptop and looked at the photos of the little house with blue shutters in Spain. For the first time, I truly understood why Harold had kept it secret all these years. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, I called Andrew. "I'm ready for that contingency plan now," I told him. "But first, I want to have one final conversation with my son." After the moving truck incident, I spent a sleepless night contemplating how we had arrived at this point. My son, whom Harold and I had raised to value honesty and integrity, had forged my signature and attempted to sell my home without my knowledge or consent. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. The next morning, I called Andrew and set our plan in motion. Then I texted Jeffrey, "We need to have a family meeting to resolve this situation. Please come to the house tomorrow at 10 a.m. with Sophia. This is not negotiable if you want any relationship with me going forward." Jeffrey responded almost immediately. "Glad you've come to your senses, Mom. We'll be there. Don't worry, everything will be fine once you're settled in Boston." His complete misreading of my message revealed how certain he was of his control over the situation. He assumed I was capitulating rather than confronting. This misconception would work to my advantage. I spent the day preparing. I gathered important documents, packed essential items in a suitcase I hid in my trunk, and made arrangements with Diana to water plants and check on the house in my absence. Andrew had already secured my most valuable possessions and documents in his office safe. When Jeffrey and Sophia arrived the next morning, they brought moving boxes and a bottle of champagne to celebrate new beginnings. The sight of their presumptuous optimism almost broke my resolve, but I remembered Harold's words, "Trust your instincts." "Before we discuss anything," I said as they settled in the living room, "there's someone else joining us." I opened the front door to admit Andrew, whose presence caused Jeffrey's smile to falter. "Why is he here?" Jeffrey demanded. "Because I asked him to come," I replied calmly, taking a seat across from them. "As my attorney, he should be present for this conversation." Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably. "This is a family matter, Mom. We don't need lawyers involved." "Actually, we do," I said, "especially when family members commit forgery and attempted fraud." The color drained from Jeffrey's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Andrew opened his briefcase and removed copies of the fraudulent sales agreement. "This document contains a forged signature purporting to be your mother's. That's a criminal offense, Mr. Harrison. The police have been notified, and they're currently investigating." Sophia gasped. Jeffrey's expression hardened. "This is ridiculous. I was helping Mom make a necessary transition. She's clearly not thinking clearly since Dad died." "I'm thinking very clearly," I countered. clear enough to recognize when I'm being manipulated and taken advantage of by my own son. Mom, you're overreacting, Jeffrey tried again. We're trying to help you. That house in Boston has already been sold to Carrington Holdings. An interesting choice of buyer, Andrew noted, considering that Carrington is your wife's maiden name and the company appears to have been created just 3 weeks ago. Sophia shifted nervously. This is absurd. We came here to help Vivian move to a more suitable living arrangement. You came here to seize control of my assets, I corrected her. The fraudulent sale has been reported to the authorities and canceled. This house is not for sale, and it never was. Jeffrey's facade cracked further. Mom, be reasonable. You can't manage alone. Dad always handled everything. You need us to take care of you. Your father made sure I would be well taken care of, I said quietly. He anticipated this situation might arise and prepared accordingly. What are you talking about? Jeffrey demanded. I nodded to Andrew, who handed me a folder. Your father left everything to me, Jeffrey. The house, the accounts, everything. I am the sole beneficiary and executor of his estate. That's not possible, Jeffrey sputtered. I'm his son, his only child. I should be the primary beneficiary. Your father made his decisions based on his assessment of what was best for everyone involved, Andrew explained professionally. All legally and properly executed. This is insane, Jeffrey said, his voice rising. Dad wouldn't cut me out completely. He didn't, I assured him. He established education trusts for Emma and Lucas that will provide for their college expenses. As for any inheritance for you, that was left to my discretion. Jeffrey stared at me. Your discretion? Yes, I confirmed. Your father trusted my judgment about when and how to share assets with you. Given recent events, I think his caution was warranted. The reality of the situation slowly dawned on Jeffrey's face. His plan had backfired completely. Not only had he failed to gain control of my house, but he had also jeopardized whatever inheritance he might have eventually received. You can't do this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. She can and has, Andrew stated firmly. Furthermore, Mrs. Harrison has decided to make some changes in her life. Changes that you precipitated with your actions. What changes? Sophia asked, looking warily between Andrew and me. I took a deep breath. I'm leaving Connecticut for a while. I need space to grieve properly and to reconsider my relationship with both of you. Leaving, Jeffrey repeated. To go where? That's not information I'm willing to share right now, I replied. What you need to know is that I've instructed Andrew to handle all communication between us going forward. Any attempt to contact me directly or to access my property will result in legal action. Jeffrey's face flushed with anger. You can't just disappear with Dad's money. That's my inheritance you're talking about. It's not your inheritance yet, I reminded him. And whether it ever becomes yours will depend entirely on your actions going forward. This is all his doing, Jeffrey accused, pointing at Andrew. He's manipulating you, turning you against your own family. Andrew remained professionally composed. I'm simply executing Harold Harrison's explicit wishes, which were to protect his wife's interests above all else. As Jeffrey and Sophia's arguments grew more desperate and accusatory, I felt a strange calm settling over me. This confrontation, painful as it was, had confirmed the wisdom of Harold's planning and my decision to follow his advice. Finally, after nearly an hour of circular arguments, I stood up. I think we've said all that needs to be said today. I'd like you to leave now. Mom, please. Jeffrey tried one last approach, his voice softening. We can work this out. We're family. Yes, we are, I agreed, which is why this betrayal hurts so much. I need time, Jeffrey. Time away from you and these attempts to control me and my assets. Jeffrey and Sophia left in stony silence, the moving boxes and champagne bottle abandoned in my living room. Andrew stayed behind briefly to confirm our arrangements. "Everything is in place," he assured me. "The flight to Spain leaves tomorrow evening. Miguel will meet you at the airport in Malaga. All the necessary documents are here." He handed me a travel folder with tickets, maps, and contact information. "Thank you, Andrew," I said sincerely, "for everything. Harold chose well when he selected you as his attorney." "Harold was a remarkable man," Andrew replied. "He loved you very much and wanted to ensure you would be protected even from difficult family situations." After Andrew left, I stood in my living room feeling both sorrow and liberation. The confrontation had been painful, but also cleansing. I was no longer living under false pretenses or trying to placate Jeffrey's demands. The truth was out, and though it had damaged our relationship, perhaps honesty was the only foundation on which we could eventually rebuild. The next day, I locked up my house, left a spare key with Diana, and drove to the airport. As the plane lifted off, carrying me toward a new chapter of life, I thought about Harold's foresight in creating this escape route for me. The house in Spain wasn't just a retirement dream. It was a sanctuary he had prepared for exactly this scenario. 8 hours later, I landed in Madrid for my connecting flight to Malaga. As promised, Miguel was waiting at the arrival gate holding a sign with my name. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s who greeted me with gentle formality and perfect English. "Señora Harrison, welcome to Spain," he said, taking my luggage. "Your husband spoke of you often. He would be happy to know you have finally come to see the house." The 90-minute drive from the airport to Nerja passed through stunning countryside mountains on one side and glimpses of the Mediterranean on the other. As we approached the town, memories of that first visit with Harold 20 years earlier flooded back. The whitewashed buildings, the narrow streets, the scent of salt water and jasmine in the air. Miguel drove through the town and up a winding road to a residential area on a hillside overlooking the sea. We stopped before a white wall with a blue gate. "Here we are," he said. "La Casa Azul, as your husband called it." He opened the gate, revealing a small courtyard filled with potted plants and a stone pathway leading to the house I had only seen in photographs. White walls, blue shutters, bougainvillea climbing alongside the entrance. Miguel unlocked the front door and gestured for me to enter first. Inside, I found a home that was both unfamiliar and strangely welcoming. The tile floors gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through windows that framed views of the Mediterranean. The furnishings were simple but comfortable, with touches of blue and yellow throughout. On the living room wall hung a ceramic tile identical to the one Harold had brought back from his first trip to Spain, the hand-painted sun that had graced our kitchen in Connecticut for decades. "Your husband chose everything himself," Miguel explained as he showed me around. "He visited twice a year to oversee renovations and furnishings. The last time was 8 months ago, before his health declined too much for travel." I ran my hand along a bookshelf filled with novels in English, many by authors Harold and I had both enjoyed. In the kitchen, I found dishes that matched our wedding china and a coffee maker identical to the one Harold used every morning at home. The bedroom was simply furnished with a large bed facing French doors that opened onto a terrace. I stepped outside and gasped at the panoramic view of the Mediterranean, stretching to the horizon, the same view Harold had fallen in love with all those years ago. "It's beautiful," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "Señor Harold said you would love the view," Miguel said gently. "He wanted everything to be perfect for when you came." That night, after Miguel had gone, promising to return the next day to help me get settled, I sat on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought of Harold, imagining him here, planning our future, creating this sanctuary one visit at a time, over 15 years. In the quiet of that first evening, surrounded by evidence of my husband's enduring love and foresight, I began to heal. Not just from the recent betrayal by Jeffrey, but from the deeper wound of losing Harold himself. The house felt like his final gift to me, a tangible expression of his desire to care for me even after he was gone. Over the following weeks, I settled into a new routine. Mornings began with coffee on the terrace, watching fishing boats on the horizon. I explored the town, practicing my limited Spanish in local shops and cafes. Miguel introduced me to neighbors and helped me navigate practical matters like banking and grocery shopping. Gradually, I made friends. An English couple who had retired there 5 years earlier, a local artist who offered to teach me watercolor painting, the family who owned the cafe at the corner where I became a regular. Life developed a pleasant rhythm, different from what I had known in Connecticut but satisfying in new ways. Andrew kept me updated on matters at home. Jeffrey had made several attempts to access the house, all thwarted by security measures we had installed. He had also tried, unsuccessfully, to contest Harold's will. Eventually, these efforts subsided as the legal realities became clear to him. 3 months into my Spanish sojourn, I received an email from Jeffrey. Unlike his previous communications, which had been angry and demanding, this message was reflective and subdued. He wrote about financial counseling he and Sophia had begun, about realizing how their lifestyle had spun out of control, and about his shame over what he had tried to do. "I betrayed Dad's trust and yours," he wrote. "I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm trying to change. Not for any inheritance, but because I don't like the person I became." I read the email several times, searching for manipulation, but finding what seemed like genuine remorse. I didn't respond immediately, allowing myself time to process my feelings. Harold would have wanted me to leave room for redemption, but he would also have advised caution. 6 months after my arrival in Spain, Jeffrey asked if he could visit. After consulting with Andrew, who reported that Jeffrey had indeed been attending financial counseling and had made no further attempts to access my assets, I agreed to a brief visit with clear boundaries established in advance. Jeffrey arrived alone, Sophia having stayed in Boston with the children. The man who stepped off the bus in Nerja looked different from the entitled son who had tried to sell my house. Humbler, less polished, more like the boy Harold and I had raised. Our reunion was awkward at first, filled with careful small talk, as we walked along the Balcón de Europa promenade, where Harold and I had once discussed retirement dreams. Eventually, we sat at a cafe overlooking the sea, and Jeffrey spoke the words I needed to hear. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said simply. "What I did was unforgivable. Dad would have been ashamed of me, and rightly so." "Why did you do it?" I asked. The question had haunted me for months. Jeffrey stared into his coffee. We were drowning in debt. The lifestyle, the vacation property, private schools. It all spiraled out of control. When Dad died, I saw his estate as a solution to our problems. He looked up at me. "It's no excuse. I knew it was wrong, but I convinced myself I was helping you while helping us." "Your father worried about your relationship with money," I told him. "He saw the pattern developing long before he died." "He was right," Jeffrey admitted. "I resented his frugality when I was growing up, not understanding he was being responsible. I wanted the trappings of success without earning them properly." He gestured around at the simple beauty of Nerja. "Now I see what he valued wasn't stuff at all." During Jeffrey's 3-day visit, we talked more honestly than we had in years. I showed him the house Harold had prepared, explaining how his father had invested in our future while maintaining a modest lifestyle. Jeffrey seemed genuinely moved by the evidence of his father's long-term planning and love. "Dad was creating something real and lasting," he observed as we sat on my terrace. "I've been chasing appearances, and it's all hollow." Before he left, Jeffrey asked about the grandchildren. "Emma and Lucas miss you," he said. "Would you consider letting them visit sometime? Not with any agenda, just to spend time with their grandmother." The request touched me. "I'd like that," I said. "Perhaps this summer." Our relationship remains a work in progress. Jeffrey has a long way to go to rebuild trust, but I see genuine efforts to change. He and Sophia sold their too expensive house and moved to a smaller home they can actually afford. They've enrolled in financial management courses and scaled back their lifestyle considerably. As for me, I've found unexpected joy in this new chapter of life. I divide my time between Connecticut and Spain, spending winters in the Mediterranean sunshine and summers closer to family and old friends. The pension Harold arranged provides more than enough for this comfortable dual existence. I've taken up painting, joined a local choir, and even started learning Spanish properly. Each new skill and friendship feels like a victory over grief, a step toward the future Harold wanted for me. Independent, secure, and fulfilled. Harold's foresight gave me more than financial security. It gave me freedom to choose how to respond to betrayal. Instead of bitterness, I've chosen cautious reconciliation. Instead of isolation, I've embraced new experiences and relationships while treasuring the old. The house with blue shutters has become more than a refuge. It's become a symbol of transformation. Here, surrounded by evidence of my husband's love and planning, I've discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. I've learned that even profound loss can lead to new beginnings and that it's never too late to reinvent your life. As I sit on my terrace watching another spectacular sunset, I think of Harold and whisper, "You were right about everything, my love. Thank you for preparing the way." In the gentle Mediterranean breeze, I almost feel his presence beside me, smiling in quiet satisfaction at a plan well executed and a love that transcended even death. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Jeffrey had succeeded in selling my house and controlling my assets. Would I ever have found my way to this peaceful terrace and the new life waiting for me here? Harold's wisdom saved me from that fate, giving me time to see the truth and space to respond with dignity rather than desperation. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that true security isn't found in possessions or control, but in knowing your own worth and having the courage to protect it. Sometimes love means keeping secrets until the right moment. Sometimes strength means walking away to find a new perspective. And sometimes wisdom means understanding when to speak up and when to smile quietly, knowing you've already won the battle that truly matters. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted Jeffrey immediately or kept quiet like I did? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the best response to betrayal is simply creating a beautiful new life for yourself, one that was planned with love all along.